You with the mop want to show my students what not to do in a fight? Those words echoed across the martial arts gym, hurled by Brent Carter, a smug black belt, instructor eager to entertain his class. His target? Leon Matthews, a 42-year-old janitor, quietly scrubbing floors in the corner. Brent laughed. The students chuckled, but what none of them knew was that Leon once went by a different name, the name that once sent fear through professional MMA circuits. Leon Hurricane Matthews, 5-time world champion. Leon had vanished from the fight world after a tragic accident in the ring that cost his best friend his life. For 20 years, he lived in the shadows, trading fame for peace. But Brent's arrogance and the sting of being belittled for his uniform and skin stirred something long buried. What began as a humiliating spectacle quickly turned. Brent attacked with flashy technique. Leon didn't flinch. He moved like water calm, calculated, devastating. With one effortless palm strike, Brent flew backward, stunned and speechless. The room fell silent. Only then did a young woman, Emily Chan, speak up. She revealed the truth. Leon wasn't just a janitor. He was a legend. Leon didn't seek applause. He offered a lesson. True strength isn't in belts or titles. It's in humility, restraint, and dignity. And in that moment, everyone understood. The mop in his hand never defined the warrior in his soul. A janitor? Really? Brent Wallace sneered from the center of the mat, arms crossed, his black belt shining under the gym lights. Come on, show the class how a mop expert throws a punch. In the corner, Leon Rivers, a quiet 42-year-old janitor, looked up slowly from the floor he was scrubbing. He had only been working at the downtown dojo for a few weeks, always arriving after hours when students were gone. But tonight's class had run late, and now he stood at the center of something he had spent 2 decades trying to avoid. I'm just here to clean, sir, Leon said evenly, returning to the stain on the tile. Brent wasn't done. No, you're here now. Let's show my students the difference between a trained fighter and someone who polishes mats. The students, 8 of them, shifted uncomfortably. Some chuckled nervously. Others looked at Brent with uncertainty. But no one expected what would come next. What Brent didn't know was that Leon had once been known as the Phantom Rivers, an undefeated 5-time world MMA champion. He had vanished from the public eye after a sparring accident that took the life of his best friend. Since then, he had worked jobs no one noticed: delivery man, janitor, dishwasher. He had sworn never to fight again. But dignity? That was something he could not ignore. All right, Leon said quietly, placing the mop to the side. But when this is over, you owe every one of them an apology for turning this place into a circus. Brent grinned. You'll be the one apologizing to the floor. As the students gathered around the mat, Emily Chen, a purple belt and psychology grad student, frowned. She had spent 2 years researching discrimination in sports. Something about Leon's calm breathing and silent posture sent chills down her spine. This wasn't an amateur. Brent made the first move. A textbook jab, fast, crisp. But Leon wasn't there. He had shifted, just enough to let the strike pass. No effort, no force. Just perfect instinct. Nice try, Leon muttered it. Brent, irritated, launched his signature combo jab, cross, hook, but once again, every punch sliced through air. Leon's body moved like smoke, and suddenly, he was just inches away from Brent's chest. You want to know the difference between fighting in a gym and surviving in the ring? Leon said softly. And then, with the lightest touch of his open palm, he sent Brent flying backward 2 full meters, crashing flat on his back. Gasps filled the gym. Brent lay there, blinking up at the ceiling, unable to understand what had happened. Emily stepped forward. She had searched Leon's name. Leon Rivers, she announced, holding her phone. Also known as the Phantom, 5-time world champion. Retired. Undefeated after an accident in Tokyo. One of the greatest fighters alive. The room froze. Students stared at Leon with awe. Brent sat up slowly, the humiliation setting in. I didn't know, Brent mumbled. If I had... Leon cut in, calm but firm. If you had known, would you have shown respect? Or would you have kept humiliating others who didn't have credentials? The question hung in the air. The answer was obvious. Emily stepped forward again. Mr. Rivers, would you consider teaching? We don't need another belt waiver. We need someone who understands what martial arts really means. Leon smiled gently for the first time. Not to teach fighting, but to teach character. 3 months later, the dojo was different. Leon was now Sensei Rivers, leading classes on advanced technique and philosophy. Emily became his assistant. Brent taught at a smaller gym across town, quieter now, humbled by public shame after the viral video of his defeat. But for Leon, it wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering who he was and proving that real strength doesn't come from fists. It comes from how you rise when the world underestimates you. Just a demonstration, Brent Carter smirked. Unless you're afraid, old man. At 42, Leon Brooks didn't flinch. He stood quietly, mop in hand, wearing a plain gray uniform, his eyes calm but unreadable. For 3 weeks, he had cleaned the local martial arts academy in silence, always arriving after the students had left. But tonight, the advanced class had run late, and Brent, the lead instructor and a black belt, known more for his ego than his technique, saw an opportunity for mockery. Brent wasn't teaching martial arts. He was performing dominance. And to him, Leon was the perfect prop. Show these kids what happens when you think you belong somewhere you don't, Brent announced loudly, gesturing toward the center of the mat. 8 students gathered, half amused, half uneasy. One of them, Sophia Tran, a 2-3-year-old jiu-jitsu purple belt and graduate student in sports psychology, sensed something was wrong. There was a presence in Leon, measured, restrained, but undeniable, like a coiled spring. Let it go, Sophia whispered to Brent. It's late. This feels wrong. But Brent ignored her. Come on, Janitor. Or do you only know how to fight stains? Leon took one long breath. Slowly, he set the mop aside. I'll step on your mat, he said quietly. But only if you agree to apologize to them when it's over. Brent laughed. You'll be the one begging for forgiveness. As Brent postured in front of his students, Leon moved with a grace that betrayed his identity. His stance was fluid, relaxed. His breathing measured. Not a beginner. Far from it. The truth was, Leon Brooks had once been the Hurricane, an undefeated MMA world champion who vanished after a tragic sparring session ended the life of his best friend and training partner. The guilt had silenced him for 2 decades. He had promised himself he would never fight again. Until now. Brent charged first, a jab, quick and sharp. But Leon wasn't there. He had already shifted his weight, allowing the punch to pass like wind against a mountain. Then came a combo jab, cross, hook. But Leon danced around it with terrifying ease. You move well for a janitor, Brent muttered. Leon didn't respond. He didn't need to. Brent swung again, more frustrated now, launching a powerful roundhouse kick. But before his foot could land, Leon stepped forward and, without force, without malice, placed a single open palm against Brent's chest. Brent flew. He was launched backwards like a rag doll, hitting the mat with a crash that silenced the entire room. Not a bruise, not a punch, just mastery. Sophia, still stunned, searched her phone. What she found confirmed what her instincts had already told her. Leon Brooks, she read aloud, also known as the Hurricane, 5-time MMA world champion, retired after a fatal training accident, undefeated. Gasps echoed around the gym. Brent sat up slowly, his face pale. The man he mocked had Once been one of the most feared and respected fighters alive. I didn't know, Brent mumbled. If I had, Leon's voice cut through the air. If you had, you'd have shown me respect. But would you have treated someone else? The janitor who wasn't a champion, the same way? Silence. Sophia stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, would you consider teaching here? Not just techniques, but what you just taught us now, about humility. Leon gave a small smile. Maybe, but not to teach how to fight, to teach how not to need to. 3 months later, the dojo had transformed. Brent had lost most of his students, his reputation in tatters. Leon became the lead instructor, focusing on philosophy, control, and dignity. Sophia worked beside him, documenting the revival of the academy. And Brent? He taught at a small gym across town, a quieter man now, shaped not by defeat, but by the lesson of who he had tried to humiliate. Because in the end, true mastery isn't about dominance. It's about knowing when not to strike and having the strength to walk away. You really want to challenge a janitor? The words came from Sophia Kim, a soft-spoken but sharp-eyed jiu-jitsu student, watching from the side of the mat as Brent Mason, the dojo's cocky lead instructor, smirked at the man holding a mop. That man was Danny Lewis, 42 years old, quiet, humble, and completely underestimated. Brent laughed. Come on, Sophia, it's just for fun. Let's give the kids a demonstration. But this wasn't about teaching, it was about ego. Danny had been working at the dojo for a month, arriving after classes to clean. Most students barely noticed him. Brent saw him as invisible, until tonight, when class ran late. Now Brent wanted to put on a show. You ever even thrown a punch? Brent sneered, tossing a glove toward Danny. Here's your chance to do more than sweep. Danny looked up. There was no anger in his eyes, just stillness. For 20 years, he had lived in silence, burying a past few knew. Once known as the Ghost, Danny Lewis had been a 5-time world champion in mixed martial arts. He disappeared after a fatal sparring incident. His best friend, a fellow fighter, had died in a tragic accident during a training session. Since then, Danny swore never to fight again. But Brent's mockery and the quiet tension in the room stirred something deeper than rage, a sense of responsibility. I'll spar, Danny said, placing the mop aside, but only if you agree to apologize to every student afterward. Brent scoffed. You'll be the one apologizing to the mat. The students formed a circle around the mat. Some watched with morbid curiosity, others with growing discomfort. Sophia glanced at Danny's stance, balanced, fluid, and far too precise for someone who had never fought. Brent launched the first jab. Fast, sharp, textbook perfect. But Danny had already moved. No wasted motion. Just a subtle shift, and Brent's punch cut through empty space. Nice form, Danny said gently, but you're lifting your right heel too early. That's why you lose power. Brent's face tightened. He attacked again, jab, cross, hook, his favorite combo, and again, Danny wasn't there. His body seemed to melt around the blows, responding with the grace of someone who didn't fight to hurt but to survive. Frustrated, Brent went for a roundhouse kick. This time, Danny stepped forward and tapped Brent's chest gently, almost lazily. Brent flew back 2 meters, landing with a thud. The room fell silent. Danny didn't gloat. He simply turned and offered a hand to help Brent up. Timing, leverage, breath, Danny said. That's what fighting taught me. But more importantly, it taught me how not to fight. Sophia, now trembling, took out her phone and quickly searched the name, Daniel Lewis. MMA. What she found stunned her. She stepped forward. Everyone, this isn't just some janitor. This is Daniel the Ghost Lewis, 5-time MMA world champion, retired after a tragedy that changed his life. Gasps echoed. Brent sat up slowly, realization dawning like cold water. I didn't know, he stammered. If I had, Danny's voice interrupted, calm but steady. If you had, would you have treated me differently? Or just picked someone else to humiliate? That question hit harder than any punch. Sophia spoke next. Mr. Lewis, would you teach us? Not just the moves, but what you know about control, about character. Danny paused, then smiled. Maybe. But I wouldn't teach you how to fight. I'd teach you when not to. 3 months later, the dojo had changed. Brent stepped down as lead instructor, too, embarrassed to face most of his students. He now ran a small gym across town. Quieter, humbler, changed. The viral video of his defeat by a janitor spread fast and changed the tone of every conversation about pride and respect in martial arts. Daniel Lewis, once the ghost, now simply Coach Danny, taught classes twice a week. But they weren't about beating people. They were about knowing your worth, even when the world doesn't. Because true strength isn't in how hard you hit. It's in how deeply you respect the power you carry, and how you choose to use it. You still want to act tough in front of your students, or are you ready to apologize? Now, the words were spoken not in anger, but in calm, measured confidence. Daniel Storm Hayes, once a legend in the MMA world, now stood barefoot on the mat of a gym where, for weeks, he had only been seen as a janitor. It had started like a bad joke. Kyle Bennett, the gym's lead instructor, was showing off to his students when he noticed Daniel cleaning in the corner. With a smug grin, Kyle invited him to demonstrate some basic technique, mocking him in front of everyone. You ever held a glove in your life, janitor? Kyle had sneered. Or are you just here to scrub the sweat of real fighters? Daniel didn't respond at first. But when Kyle pushed again, and when the students began to laugh, he looked up. If I accept, Daniel said softly, you'll apologize to all of them when we're done. Kyle laughed. You'll be the one saying sorry when you wake up staring at the ceiling. But Daniel wasn't just a janitor. He had once been one of the most feared names in professional fighting. Storm Hayes, 5-time MMA world champion, known for ending matches in under 2 rounds. He disappeared after a training accident took the life of his best friend and sparring partner, vowing never to fight again. Until tonight. As Kyle stood proudly in the center of the mat, students circled around eagerly. One of them, Jasmine Lee, a 22-year-old jiu-jitsu student working on her thesis about discrimination in sports, felt something wasn't right. She noticed the way Daniel breathed, the way his body subtly shifted weight. This man was no beginner. Kyle lunged first, with sharp jabs and loud grunts. But Daniel wasn't there. He slid out of the point, effortlessly, like a shadow avoiding sunlight. The crowd began to quiet. Kyle's punches grew sloppier with frustration. He launched his signature hook, his favorite move. But Daniel sidestepped it, and with a soft palm, touched Kyle's chest. Kyle flew backward, literally lifted off the ground and thrown by sheer technique. He hit the mat with a dull thud. Silence followed. As Kyle lay stunned, Jasmine stepped forward, her phone in hand. This man, she said, voice shaking, is Daniel Hayes Storm. 5-time world champion. Undefeated. Retired after an accident in Tokyo. And you mocked him. Kyle sat up slowly. I didn't know. Daniel looked at him. If you had known, would you have treated me with respect? Or would you have just picked someone else to humiliate? It wasn't just about Kyle anymore. It was about a culture one that values belts over wisdom, status over character. Jasmine turned to Daniel. Would you teach us? Not just fighting, but what you just showed us tonight. Humility, awareness, restraint. Daniel hesitated. For 20 years, he had been running from who he was. But tonight, seeing Jasmine speak up, seeing a younger generation demand something better, he found. Something worth returning for. I won't teach you how to hurt people, he said. I'll teach you how not to become the kind of person who wants to. 3 months later, the gym was transformed. Kyle no longer led with arrogance. Many students had left after the video went viral, showing a janitor dismantling a black belt without landing a punch. Kyle now taught elsewhere, a changed man. Daniel Hayes, quiet, humble, powerful, was back. But this time, as a teacher of something far more valuable than strikes and submissions. Because true strength, as his story proved, doesn't need to shout. It stands still and lets the storm come to it. Show us how to mop the floor with your face, laughed Kyle Ramsey, the arrogant martial arts instructor, as he pointed at the quiet janitor standing near the corner of the gym. His target, Mr. Elijah Brooks, didn't respond. At 45, Elijah was no stranger to mockery or prejudice. For the past month, he had worked nights at the academy, cleaning sweat and mud off the mats while others trained for glory. Tonight, he had lingered a bit too long, and now he was being turned into a joke. Kyle, tall and confident in his black belt, turned to his students. Watch this, he grinned. A little demonstration of why belts matter. Laughter spread, but one person didn't smile. Leah Tran, a 21-year-old psychology student and purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She had spent 2 years researching discrimination in sports for her senior thesis. Something about the way Elijah carried himself unsettled her. He didn't shrink. He didn't panic. He just stood still. Sir, Elijah said quietly, placing the mop against the wall. I don't want trouble. But if this is how you treat people, then maybe your students deserve to see what real discipline looks like. The air in the room shifted. Kyle scoffed. Please. You wouldn't last 1 minute. Elijah nodded. Then give me 1 minute. What no one in that gym knew, what even Leah had not yet discovered, was that Elijah Brooks was once known as the Quiet Lion, a 5-time undefeated MMA world champion who vanished from the spotlight after his best friend was killed in a sparring accident. Since then, Elijah had wandered from job to job, seeking peace, not glory. But sometimes, peace must be interrupted to protect something greater. Dignity. The spar began. Kyle attacked immediately. Jab, hook, front kick, all fast, all technically correct. But Elijah didn't even blink. Each strike missed as he shifted, leaned, or simply wasn't where Kyle expected him to be. The movements were too smooth, too calculated for a novice. Some students began whispering. Leah was already typing on her phone. Something felt very wrong. No. Very right. Kyle, sweating, launched his final combo, his signature finisher. But Elijah stepped forward and placed a single open palm on Kyle's chest. A heartbeat later, Kyle was airborne, landing with a loud crash 2 meters away. Silence. Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply turned and offered Kyle his hand. You teach with your fists, Elijah said, but you forgot to teach with your heart. Leah, now pale, found what she was looking for and gasped. Oh my God, you're Elijah Brooks, the Quiet Lion, 5-time world champ, retired, undefeated. After Tokyo, heads snapped toward her. Phones came out. Searches began. And suddenly, the janitor wasn't invisible anymore. Kyle sat up, his eyes wide with embarrassment and awe. If I had known, Elijah shook his head. If you had known, would you have respected me? Or just chosen someone else to humiliate? That question lingered in the air like smoke. Leah stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, would you teach here again? Not for belts, for character. Elijah paused, then smiled. Only if we start by cleaning the mat, not with a mop, but with truth. 3 months later, the gym was transformed. Kyle, humbled, stepped back from leadership choosing to relearn instead of lead. Elijah, now called Coach Brooks, taught philosophy, balance, and how to master the ego before mastering the opponent. Leah helped launch a new program at the academy called Silent Strength, focused on dignity, resilience, and justice in combat sports. And though the mop still stood in the corner, no one ever looked at it the same again, because they now knew, sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who's already won the loudest battles. Invite her? As a joke? Sneered Catherine Blackwell, swirling champagne in her glass as she watched Veronica Jones, a hotel housekeeper, quietly clear plates at the back of the grand ballroom. Yes, Catherine smirked. Let's see what happens when a maid thinks she belongs with millionaire. The occasion was the prestigious Blackwell Foundation Gala, a celebration of legacy, money, and control. Veronica, dressed in her plain gray uniform, wasn't supposed to be seen, much less acknowledged. But that night, Catherine made a mistake. She handed Veronica an invitation, not out of kindness, but as a setup. She actually showed up, someone whispered in disbelief. All heads turned. The woman entering wasn't wearing a uniform. She wore a flowing, deep blue satin gown, minimal but regal. Her natural curls framed a face that held no shame, only quiet power. It was Veronica Jones, and she had arrived not to serve, but to reclaim. I thought this was a black tie event, Catherine muttered loudly. It is, Veronica said, her voice calm. And this is my seat. You don't belong here, Catherine snapped. Veronica smiled. That's funny, because according to this, she held up a worn but legally sealed envelope. I am a rightful heir to the Blackwell estate. Gasps echoed through the room. Edward Blackwell, the late patriarch and founder, had died, mysteriously a decade ago. His son's wife, Catherine, had taken over the empire, never acknowledging Edward's rumored illegitimate daughter from a past affair. But Veronica had come prepared. 2 years working undercover as a cleaning woman in the very hotel Catherine owned gave her time to gather what she needed: documents, DNA, results, a witness, and most damning of all, a confession. The lights dimmed. A video played. Edward's former lawyer, long retired, appeared on screen. I've lived with this secret long enough. Edward had another child. Her name is Veronica. He loved her deeply. But after he died, his will was altered. I regret being silent. The original document is with her. Catherine's face turned white. Then came the final blow. Footage of Catherine threatening staff, embezzling funds, and ordering the quiet cover-up of Edward's original will. It was over. In the stunned silence, Judge Hamilton, an unexpected guest and longtime friend of Edward, rose from his seat. Effective immediately, he declared, Veronica Jones will inherit 60% of the Blackwell estate. A federal investigation into corporate misconduct will begin at dawn. Catherine tried to object. This is insane. She's just a maid. Veronica stepped forward. No, Catherine. I was a maid, by necessity. But I'm also a graduate of Howard University. A businesswoman. And most importantly, Edward Blackwell's daughter. The truth doesn't care what clothes I wear. 3 months later, the Blackwell empire had changed completely. Catherine was charged with fraud, stripped of her titles, and exiled from the board. Veronica became CEO of Blackwell Industries, launching a social equity division and scholarship fund named the Invisible Legacy Project, designed to find, uplift, and protect those society often overlooks. Former cleaning staff were promoted. Hiring practices were overhauled. And Veronica's face, once unseen, now led a national conversation on dignity, justice, and inherited power. One reporter asked her during a press conference, "What was the most satisfying part of your journey?" Veronica smiled. Walking into that gala and showing every little girl who's ever been told she's not enough that she's more than they could ever imagine. Because true justice isn't revenge, it's restoration. Not about tearing others down, but rising so high. The ones who tried to bury you have no choice but to watch you bloom. At just 10 years old, Maya Williams could fix things most adults couldn't. So when millionaire businessman Andrew Whitman found himself stranded at a rural gas station with his vintage Mustang smoking, he didn't expect a young black girl in overalls pop the hood and diagnose the issue in under 2 minutes. "You've got a cracked hose, sir," she said with a confident smile. "I can patch it temporarily, if you've got tape." Stunned by her skill, Andrew noticed something else, a ring on her finger, a ring he hadn't seen in over a decade. It once belonged to a girl he had promised to protect at a corrupt orphanage called Little Angels, an orphanage that mysteriously shut down. That moment launched a whirlwind of truth. Maya was one of the gifted children once, experimented on by his father's secret research program, and Andrew had unknowingly abandoned her. But Maya didn't seek revenge. She sought justice for herself and the other children. With her intelligence and courage, and Andrew's help, they exposed the conspiracy and dismantled the Whitman empire of abuse. Sometimes a small act like fixing a car can uncover buried truths and change lives. Never underestimate the quiet strength of a child, or the ripple effect of keeping a promise. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. What's one promise you'll never break? And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of courage, justice, and the unexpected. Blanks for watching Withing Heroes Among Us.